What's cooking, creatures? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is about to be a breakdown for episodes 1 and 2 of Creature Commandos, an animated show that I have been looking forward to for so long, because I'm a big fan of anything obscure in comics, because I feel like that's where all the really interesting and underrated stuff really are. So without further ado, let's just get into this thing. Now, Creature Commandos is kind of a big deal because it's officially the first project of the new DCU cinematic universe overseen by co-head of DC Studios, James Gunn. We are in a completely new variant universe parallel to the old DCEU that ended with the second Aquaman movie. This means that while this new universe shares a lot of the same elements and events that happened in the old DCEU, there will be some slight variations in this timeline's history, as well as in some of the faces that may have appeared in the past. And to celebrate this new era of DC, the series starts with a brand new logo animation featuring a Golden Age Superman, as you can tell by the yellow and black shield at the center of his chest. Then episode 1, titled The Collywobbles, starts with the exterior of the Belle Reef Correctional Center, an exterior that we saw for the first time in 2021's The Suicide Squad when Team 1 first assembled. And it's apparently 10 a.m. when we meet up with Argus director Amanda Waller and Rick Flag Sr., the father of Rick Flag Jr., who we saw get murdered by Peacemaker in The Suicide Squad. Amanda Waller is of course played by actress Viola Davis, like she has been in both Suicide Squad movies as well as the Peacemaker series, while Rick Flag Sr. is played by actor Frank Grillo, who previously played the villain Crossbones in Captain America 2 and 3. Inside Waller's office, they watch a GBS news report, with GBS standing for Galaxy Broadcasting System, a news organization from the comics founded by Superman villain Morgan Edge. And because of this, GBS actually made a super quick appearance in the first DCEU movie, Man of Steel. As Superman and Zod punch each other around Metropolis at blinding speeds, you can actually see the GBS building right over here. And GBS news reports have also been seen in a number of DC movies like both Shazam and Aquaman films, Blue Beetle, and The Suicide Squad. The GBS reporter on screen here is actually voiced by CNN news anchor Jake Tapper, as he tells of an ongoing conflict in the fictional country of Pokolistan, a country introduced into DC Comics continuity in Superman, the Man of Steel issue number 109. Apparently, this group of radical, douchey men, modeled after the real-life Proud Boys group, have called themselves the Sons of Themyscira, and have aligned themselves with the Amazonian Wonder Woman villain Cersei. Cersei promised these losers that if they helped her claim what she believed was her rightful place on the throne of Pokolistan, she would help them take over Wonder Woman's home island of Themyscira, because they all thought it was unfair that men were not allowed to insert themselves in the private business of women for some reason. But fun fact, the name Sons of Themyscira actually originates in the DC Comics, but for a completely different group of men. Introduced in 2012's Wonder Woman number 7, the Sons of Themyscira were revealed to be the group of male babies that the Amazonians abandoned after they gave birth to them. You know, because those babies did not have that vaginal valor that they needed. And I know what some of you may be thinking. MT, how does an island full of women reproduce without any peeners around? And that's a great question. Groups of Amazons would actually routinely leave Themyscira to find men to knock them up. However, after they all got their cream filling, they would all do some mean killing and murder their baby daddies before they all headed back home to their island. And all those abandoned baby boys would ultimately be found by Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, where they would all become his happy apprentices. The character Cersei herself made her first appearance in 1949's Wonder Woman number 37, and is of course based off of the Cersei character from Greek mythology, primarily the Odyssey by the Greek poet Homer. And much like the original ancient source material, Cersei has the ability to transmute objects from one thing to another, much like the Eternal Cersei can in Marvel's Eternals. And while the Cersei from mythology typically used her magic to transform humans into animals, the multiple versions of Cersei that have appeared across DC Comics history appear to be able to fully transmute a person or part of a person into anything else entirely, while also having a variety of other magic powers like magic blasts, shields, teleportation, clairvoyance, etc. You know, that typical witchy shit. And seeing that the United States and Pokolistan are about to finalize a crucial oil deal, Amanda Waller wants Rick Flag Sr. to assemble a team and put an end to Cersei's plans. However, Rick Flag Sr. is a little bit confused about how Amanda Waller plans for him to do this, considering that Amanda Waller's daughter, Leota Adebayo, exposed Amanda Waller's lengthy history with using criminals as expendable soldiers with the Task Force X initiative at the very end of Peacemaker Season 1, with Flag's comments cementing that Creature Commandos occurs after both the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. 2 years later, in fact, according to some later dialogue. But anyways, to answer Flag's question, Amanda Waller opens the door to Argus's non-human internment division, the home of Task Force M, aka the Creature Commandos. Amanda Waller's way of bypassing Congress's order to stop using incarcerated humans as secret combatants, because no one on this team is technically fully human. And it's a task force that has apparently been around for over 50 years, which makes sense as the original comic book Creature Commandos were created to help fight Nazis in World War II. The Creature Commandos were a creation by J.M. DeMatteis and Pat Broderick for a comic book series known as Weird War Tales in November 1980. Weird War Tales was a series all about telling war stories, but with a twist, whether that twist be supernatural, science fiction, or a mix of both. And in the 93rd issue of this comic series, we are introduced to the Creature Commandos of Project M, a super secret government project sponsored by every branch of the US military, meant to create monsters for the purposes of fighting the Nazis of World War II. They came to the conclusion that, because the fear of supernatural monstrosities is innate in almost every human being, the use of monsters on the front lines would scare their enemies long enough to distract and weaken them in battle, a form of advanced and radical psychological warfare. And the person that helped the US government come to this conclusion was the brilliant scientist Professor Mazursky, who used his expertise in the realms of genetics, biochemistry, and robotics to turn a bunch of human volunteers into superpowered monsters for Project M, creating the first iteration of Creature Commandos. The original team included a werewolf, a vampire, and a Frankenstein-esque monster. The werewolf was actually a former World War II soldier named Warren Griffith, who originally suffered from a condition called lycanthropy, which caused him to believe that he was a werewolf. However, after being taken into Project M, Professor Mazursky would put Griffith under the knife to literally make him a werewolf that transformed between wolf and man, seemingly at random. And going by the name Wolfpack, it would take years of practice before Griffith would master transforming between forms at will. And the vampire on the team was originally a soldier named Sergeant Vincent Velcro, but would be turned into the scientific approximation of a vampire after he would volunteer his body to be experimented on by Project M for a few months to avoid getting himself a 30-year prison sentence for treason. Mazursky would inject Velcro's blood with a cocktail of chemicals that also included blood from a New Mexican vampire bat in order to achieve such a metamorphosis. And after the change, Velcro would develop a strong appetite for blood, which he was only limited to drinking from the blood of the US Army's enemies. And finally, the Frankenstein-looking dude was former US Marine Elliot Taylor, also known as Lucky, which is a hilarious nickname for a man who would goof his way into stepping on a landmine like a dingus. Mazursky would again use his mastery of science to take Lucky's body parts, stitch them back together, and bring him back to life, minus his ability to speak, due to Mazursky being unable to save his vocal cords from that landmine. And because of this, Lucky would get the nickname Patchwork and would lumber around grunting to his teammates in an effort to communicate. And so the three of these monsters were the original creatures of the Creature Commandos, who were all led by the 100% human Lieutenant Matthew Shreve, who they all hated because he was kind of a dick. And the four of them would kick all sorts of ass for the American government and the Allied forces for years, until eventually in the pages of Weird War Tales 110, a fifth member of the team named Myra Rhodes was introduced in the goofiest way possible. Because after the leader of the Creature Commandos, Matthew Shreve, got some much needed plastic surgery done by Myra Rhodes, the Creature Commandos would all get super jealous that their leader got to look like a regular human, that they would all stomp down the hallway of the hospital super pissed off. And while doing so, accidentally knocking over a bunch of chemicals. And being exposed to these fumes, Myra's hair would inexplicably turn into a bunch of snakes a la Medusa from Greek mythology, which is why she would join the Creature Commandos under the codename Medusa. We would also learn that Professor Mazursky was responsible for the creation of the superheroine Miss America through Project M as well, as Project M would kidnap news reporter Joan Dale and experiment on her before wiping her memory when they thought those experiments failed. But later on, Dale's transmutation powers would manifest and she would resolve to become a superhero on her own. But not only this, but Dr. Mazursky, along with his colleague Dr. Chuck Grayson, were also responsible for the construction of both versions of the Nazi-killing GI robot. Introduced in 1981's Weird War Tales No. 101, the original GI robot was actually given the name Jake 1, with Jake standing for Jungle Assault Killer Experiment, due to him being built for jungle warfare with a plethora of bullets, missiles, and torpedoes and whatnot. However, Jake 1 would be destroyed in Weird War Tales No. 111 when he sacrificed himself to save a team of Marines. And seeing the GI robot project as too important to discontinue, Project M would create a new GI robot model named Jake 2, who would continue fighting Nazis before eventually joining the Creature Commandos. This is why GI Robot's helmet has the number 2 written on it in the show. And later on during the 2000s, DC Comics would add a mummy named Aten, as well as an amphibious sea creature called the Bogman, inspired by the Gillman from the creature from the Black Lagoon onto the Creature Commandos. Then, years after that, in the summer of 2011, DC's Flashpoint event would introduce Frankenstein's monster, Eric Frankenstein, as well as the amphibious Nina Mazursky to the Creature Commandos in Flashpoint, Frankenstein and the Creatures of the Unknown No. 1. In the Flashpoint continuity, Nina Mazursky was originally the adoptive daughter of Professor Mazursky, after being found by the professor in a little monster village in Romania. Professor Mazursky would lie to Nina and say that she looked the way that she did because of experiments that he did to her when she was young. But she was actually just born like that. Professor Mazursky would, of course, throw his daughter onto the Creature Commandos team when she got older, because that's exactly what the Father of the Year would do to keep their daughter safe. Like, what are you doing? Stop that. However, that was Flashpoint Nina. A few months later, in the fall of 2011, the New 52 comic book reboot would completely reinvent the Creature Commandos history once again in November's Frankenstein Agent of Shade. But instead of having Nina thrown onto the team by her scientist father, it was Nina herself who would create Project M as well as the Creature Commandos, willingly turning herself into an amphibious creature in order to help and join the team. And with Frankenstein as the team leader, the New 52 version of the Creature Commandos would also add a mummy named Khalees to the team, with the Bride of Frankenstein assisting the Creature Commandos on the side as well. But anyways, Rick Flag Sr. is then introduced to this universe's version of Task Force M, a team consisting of Dr. Nina Mazursky, GI Robot, the Bride of Frankenstein, as well as Task Force X alum Weasel, who we last saw regaining consciousness on the shores of Corto Maltese at the very end of the good Suicide Squad movie, after everyone assumed that he drowned at the beginning of the film. Though it was assumed that Weasel was going to live the rest of his days roaming the jungles of Corto Maltese as a free monster, he apparently got picked up by Amanda Waller sometime within the last 2 years and was relocated to the non-human internment division following the dissolvement of the Suicide Squad. And in the comics, Weasel was originally created as a villain for the superhero Firestorm in the pages of 1985's Firestorm No. 36. And he actually wasn't a weasel monster to begin with, but rather a criminal in a weasel costume. Weasel wouldn't be randomly changed into an actual animal beast until 2013's Forever Evil No. 1. But anyways, playing Jenga with GI Robot is the Batman villain Dr. Phosphorus, introduced in the pages of Detective Comics 469 in 1977. Originally a nuclear scientist known as Alexander Sartorius, a nuclear plant explosion would cause his body to turn into radioactive phosphorus. So, much like Weasel, Dr. Phosphorus has no previous affiliation with the Creature Commandos in the comics before this show. And because of his constantly exposed skeleton, Rick Flag Sr. would refer to Dr. Phosphorus as Jason and the Argonauts, a reference to the classic skeleton battle scene from the 1963 film. And when the character The Bride is introduced, we can see her reading a copy of Young Love, an old series of romance comics produced by DC Comics in the 50s and 60s. And on the cover, we can see the words, "My ex is toxic, but he's hot," an allusion towards the bride's own insanely toxic ex-husband that is Frankenstein's monster, Eric Frankenstein, played by actor David Harbour, who previously starred in the DCEU as National Security Advisor Dexter Tolliver in Suicide Squad, The Bad Suicide Squad. And at the sight of Amanda Waller, the Bride, Weasel, and Dr. Phosphorus all try to attack her, but are immediately subdued when Waller uses her phone to shock every member of the team. Then, after the intro, which features an animated version of James Gunn, much like we saw in the Harley Quinn Season 3 premiere, we see Rick Flag Sr. with his team on an Argus helicopter with his new Task Force M, echoing how his son Rick Flag Jr. did the very same thing in the Suicide Squad movies before he died. Weasel is still clearly traumatized by his last chaotic trip to Corto Maltese while he was working with Task Force X on Project Starfish, meant to neutralize the giant cosmic starfish entity Starro. So naturally, they had to work extra hard to strap him into the helicopter to keep him from freaking out. And when the team finally arrives in Pokolistan, they exit the helicopter in a very similar formation to how James Gunn had the Guardians line up when they first arrived on Counter-Earth in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And after meeting up with the local military, the Creature Commandos are driven to the castle of Alana Rostovic, played by one of James Gunn's homies, Maria Bakalova, who has previously played Cosmo the Space Dog in both Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and the Guardians Holiday Special. And while on the way to the castle, however, two members of the Sons of Themyscira sit in a car watching the convoy in a nearby alley. An alley that has the word PORN spray painted on a nearby wall for some reason. I can't say the full word, or else YouTube will demonetize this video. And when the convoy stops for a quick second, we can see Nina Mazursky smiling and waving back at a small child before that child gets angrily pulled away by their mother. A moment reminiscent of the first X-Men movie when Cyclops smiles and waves at a kid before his mother yoinks them away. And when the gang finally arrives at the castle, they meet Princess Alana, who reveals that Rick Flag Sr.'s middle name is Bill. This is a deviation from the comics, as the Rick Flag Sr. from the source material has the middle name of Montgomery. Comic book Rick Flag Sr. was actually the leader of the original Suicide Squad, by the way, back when it was known as the Suicide Squadron. Introduced in the pages of Star Spangled War Stories number 116, the original Suicide Squadron was a team consisting of non-superpowered human soldiers who became convicted felons. And that group would eventually evolve and become the Suicide Squad that we know of today, after the group was absorbed by both Argus and Task Force X decades later. But anyways, Alexei and the Pokolistan troops then prank Rick Flag Sr. to show the team of Americans that they have similar senses of humor and tastes. And to prove this, Alexei would start listing off some extremely dated American pop culture references, like the 2002 prank show The Jamie Kennedy Experiment, the famous Super Bowl Shuffle from the 1985 Chicago Bears, the old "Wazza" Budweiser commercials from the early 2000s, as well as the 1984 Where's the Beef ad campaign from Wendy's. And after the introductions, the Commandos are immediately given a welcome feast by Alana. And while the team scarfs down their food, Rick apologizes for their lack of decorum and manners, citing that the prison food that they usually eat gives him the collywobbles, the very name of this episode. And if you don't know what the term collywobbles is, don't worry, my black ass did not know about that term either, but it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like: stomach discomfort and nervousness. We then see that the Queen of Pokolistan herself is in attendance at this dinner. Well, sort of. She's not exactly all there, as Alana says that she hasn't been herself for quite some time now. But part of me feels like something mighty suspicious is going on with the princess and the queen, because Alana kinda waited much too long to introduce the queen to Rick and the team despite being right there in front of them. The princess literally just let her drool on a chair next to Rick as she flirted with him, which kind of makes me think that maybe the princess isn't as kind as she seems, and could have possibly been responsible for her mother's loss of vitality somehow, possibly through magical or scientific means. Or maybe she could even be the queen herself who has somehow possessed the body of her daughter in order to maintain her youth. This would sort of explain why Alana is into older men and why she values 500-year-old furniture. Or maybe this is just an old lady taking a nap. Who knows? I'm just keeping the doors of possibility open, I guess. But anyways, one of my favorite parts of this episode is how kind Nina is to G.I. Robot while everybody else mostly ignores him, even making sure that he got some diesel fuel to drink at their dinner and saying that she would be happy to fight Nazis with him someday. G.I. Robot then gets super excited at the notion of having a friend to fight Nazis with, and even says that he's been waiting for such a thing to happen for a little over 74 years, which basically means since the 1950s. This could possibly be a slight nod to G.I. Robot's old war buddy, Sergeant Coker, from the comics, with Coker being G.I. Robot's human handler in the field. But anyways, while the commandos are just chillin' with the princess and her army, we learn that Rick Flag Sr. and his now divorced wife had Rick Flag Jr. when they were both 18 years old, and how Jr. would follow his father's footsteps into military service when he turned 18 as well. Rick and Alana's conversation would quickly lead to the bedroom later that night, where the princess's advances would be promptly rejected by Rick in the name of professionalism. However, elsewhere in the castle, the bride decides to leap out of the window for a late night walk around the country, with Nina following her after hearing the bride escape while she was submerged in a bathtub. This might hint at an ability of Nina's to detect vibrations while her entire body is submerged in water, but that's just a guess based on her actions. I have no idea. But anyways, before the bride and Nina hop into a taxi to Victor Frankenstein's castle, she forces a guard to give her some rubles, which is of course the currency of Russia and not Pokolistan at all. And while they're on their way there, Dr. Phosphorus gets the bright idea to try to steal the Argus phone that shocks all of the commandos. But Rick immediately catches him, leading them to both fight throughout the castle. I find it really interesting how Dr. Phosphorus is still able to wear human clothes despite being made of extremely hot radioactive material. I mean, Rick touching him immediately burns his skin, but somehow Phosphorus can still wear a hoodie and pants? That shit don't make no sense. But then again, neither does the Hulk's pants staying on whenever he transforms in the Marvel Comics, so let's just let comic book universes be comic book universes, I guess. And during their fight, Dr. Phosphorus accidentally causes the floor underneath them to collapse, leading them to fall to the kitchen below. And when Phosphorus recovers, we can see that the fall managed to snap his neck, but his powers allow him to easily snap it back into place, showing just how resilient of a guy that he is. And it's a good thing too, because a little bit later, Rick would hit that living nightlight with a devastating suplex, showing that Rick has an affinity for watching wrestling. But their fight eventually calms down when Rick assures Phosphorus that he's not here to torture them like Amanda Waller does. Then the episode ends with the ladies arriving at Frankenstein's castle, which was actually located in the Bavarian Alps in the 1931 Frankenstein film, the first time a castle has ever been associated with Frankenstein. There was actually no castle whatsoever in Mary Shelley's original Frankenstein novel from 1818. But little do the ladies know that they have been watched by a mysterious woman who has Eric Frankenstein on speed dial, alerting him of his bride's return to their former home. And it's hilarious how the only live action element of this entire show is her home screen background of a shirtless Zac Efron, because I guess those abs were just too powerful to be translated into animation. But anyways, judging by this episode's ending, Eric Frankenstein has been doing rather well financially, as he literally owns a yacht full of women willing to party with an undead psychopath. So I'm curious to see what kind of job he does for a living as these episodes progress. However, before I move on to episode 2, I totally forgot to mention a super funny reference from the beginning of this episode, because while GBS News is covering the Sons of Themyscira blowing up a petrol station, this guy's hands-on head reaction to the explosion is a reference to the famous Super Hot Fire rap battle on the internet, where one of the audience members does the exact same thing. And after the theme song of episode 2, titled The Tourmaline Necklace, we catch up with a bloodied Rick Flag getting treated by Princess Alana. In his hand is, of course, the phone that shocks the commandos after Phosphorus made an unsuccessful play for it. And on the top of the phone screen, you can actually see that a series of nanites were injected in each of the commandos' brains, and those nanites are what activates the jolt throughout their system whenever they misbehave. Meanwhile, both Bride and Nina arrive at Victor Frankenstein's old abandoned laboratory when Nina remarks that her own father was a scientist, a reference to Professor Mazursky, the original creator of the Creature Commandos from the comics. Then we get a flashback to the moment that the Bride was first brought to life, a moment that I found extremely thought-provoking due to how the Bride handled being born. To go from not existing to being aware that you now exist in a universe that you know nothing about is extremely terrifying. Like, we as human beings truly are extremely blessed with not remembering the moment we were born, because the thought of suddenly materializing with the brain of an adult person would definitely cause me to react just as wildly as the Bride did. And over the course of the episode, we see Victor Frankenstein teaching the Bride how to speak and be human in order for Eric to have a bride close to him in intellect. However, both Victor and the Bride begin to grow emotionally close with one another, with Victor eventually gifting the Bride with a tourmaline necklace, the very first object in the world that the Bride found beauty in. But eventually, Victor would grow too close to the Bride and would end up doing some Netflix and necrophilia with her in front of Eric, who would then end up ripping Victor Frankenstein apart in rage. James Gunn's iteration of Frankenstein is yet another narrative of his that deals with the idea of a possessive relationship, as both Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and 3 primarily dealt with this concept with both Ego and Peter Quill respectively. Ego wanted to possess Meredith Quill so badly that he killed her, while Peter desperately wanted an alternate universe Gamora to be his dead girlfriend. However, women are not items made to be molded in the visions of other men, and Frankenstein fails to understand this. So much so that he would go on to chase the Bride around the world over the course of the next 200 years, leading to fights between the two in 1852 Paris, an American saloon in 1880, the Arabian Desert in 1895, the depths of the ocean in 1912, at a burlesque show in 1923, on the battlefields of World War II in 1941, England in 1964, and a concert venue called the Reptile Room in 1991. And while they fight in the Reptile Room, you can see Frankenstein wearing an Ultra Bunny shirt, the same shirt Rick Flag wore in the Suicide Squad the day that he was murdered by Peacemaker. And speaking of Peacemaker, we can also see another Ultra Bunny shirt on Evan Calcaterra in episode 2 of Peacemaker's series. And episode 4 even revealed that Vigilante had an Ultra Bunny bobblehead on the dashboard of his car. Ultra Bunny can be seen with a sign that says, "Obstacles are opportunities," which was a slogan that James Gunn felt resonated with the entire production process of the Suicide Squad. And we also see quick flashes of Frankenstein and the Bride fighting in the New York Stock Exchange, the Victorian era, Woodstock, and the Shogun era. But what's so great about the Woodstock moment specifically is that we can see Shaggy from Scooby-Doo watching the fight go down in the background. A hilarious Easter egg considering that James Gunn wrote both the 2002 and 2004 Scooby-Doo movies. Two absolute masterpieces of film, mind you. And while the Bride casually uses her super strength to push heavy objects aside in search of her tourmaline necklace, the Bride mentions how Nina is actually a human being who was turned into an amphibious beast, much like the New 52 version of Nina was. So it seems like the implication is that Professor Mazursky actually transformed his daughter into the creature she is today at some point. But it could have also been an accident. We just don't know yet. But while Rick is too busy getting his flag wet with Ilana, Nina finds the necklace for Bride before they're both jumped by Cersei and the Sons of Themyscira. Then we get this amazing action sequence of the Bride showing off her enhanced super soldier powers as she throws the Sons around like stuffed animals. And we also get a great showcase of Cersei's transmutation powers when Cersei turns bullets into butterflies, a moment reminiscent to Doctor Strange's fight with Thanos in Infinity War when he would do the same with a black hole. However, Cersei's transmutation powers would fuck up the Bride's day completely when her arms are turned into two massive, wacky, inflatable, arm-flailing tube men right when Cersei was getting her ass beat. eventually leading the bride to getting thrown off of Frankenstein's castle and landing next to Anina, who just got her fishbowl cracked open, with the episode ending on that insane cliffhanger. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this breakdown of episodes 1 and 2 of Creature Commandos. What'd you guys think of these first 2 episodes? Let us know in the comment section down below. And like always, you guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and also hitting that notification bell to get notifications for every time we upload a video. And hey, maybe even hit that like button if you're feeling extra generous. And like always, if you guys like clothes, head on over to the Heavy Spoilers store to pick up some merch for your bodies. But thanks again for watching this video. You guys are amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.